What would you do if some outsider marched into your town and told you to tear down the very place where your father built his life's work, the one spot holding your family's memories together? Would you just roll over, or would you fight back? My name's Michael Carter. Though most folks here call me Mike, I'm 48, a former Marine, now running a small mechanic shop out on the edge of Cedar Ridge, Texas. My family's been here for generations. The old brick garage sitting by the lake isn't just four walls and a roof, it's a piece of us. My dad laid those bricks with his own hands back in the year 1960. He used to fix tractors, pickups, even the sheriff's cruiser in that garage. When I was a boy, I'd sit on the hood of an old Ford and watch him wipe grease off his hands, telling me that honest work was the backbone of a man. Later, when I came back from the service, that garage was where I found peace. Again, the smell of oil, the clang of a wrench, the ghost of my dad's voice telling me to keep going. It sat right by Cedar Ridge Lake, the water sparkling behind it. The lake itself was man-made, born when a dam went up in the 1940s. Folks fished there, swam there, lived their lives around it. Nobody ever questioned that the Carter garage and the lake belonged together, like they'd grown out of the same red Texas dirt. But times changed. Around 2018, the developers came. Shiny houses popped up on the hillsides, glass decks and stone driveways replacing mesquite trees. Along with the houses came an HOA, the Cedar Ridge Lakeside Community Association, and at the top of it all was Karen Mitchell. Karen rolled in from Dallas with money, ambition, and a smile sharper than barbed wire. Within months, she had glossy brochures printed talking about elevating Cedar Ridge and building a premier lakeside retreat. Her vision didn't include people like me. At first, it was small digs, letters about my pickup being unsightly in the driveway, complaints that my daughter's bike leaning against the garage disrupted curb appeal, a warning about the American flag hanging a little faded above the shop door. Then came the hammer. One hot June afternoon, I opened the mailbox and pulled out a thick white envelope stamped with the HOA seal. Inside was a typed order. The non-compliant brick garage located on parcel 12 must be removed within 30 days. Failure to comply will result in fines of $1,000 per day. My hands shook, recalling my dad's garage an eyesore, a liability, a stain on their fancy lakeside brochures. That evening, I drove up to Karen's house, a modern glass and stone palace on the ridge, and knocked hard on her door. She opened it with a practiced smile, pearls at her neck. "Mr. Carter," she said, like she was already done with me. "That structure may hold sentimental value to you, but it does not align with the refined vision of Cedar Ridge. Property values demand consistency. The garage has to go." I clenched my fists, heat crawling up my neck. The garage has been standing since 1960. As part of this town, it's not going anywhere. Her eyes narrowed, the smile slipping. "Then get ready. Mr. Carter, the fines will start in 30 days. And believe me, I always collect." I walked back down that hill with my jaw tight. The letter crumpled in my fist. Karen hadn't just threatened me. She'd declared war on the Carter name. Karen wasted no time. A week later, she called what she proudly labeled an urgent HOA session. The meeting took place in the brand new clubhouse, polished stone floors, leather chairs, and an air conditioner blasting so cold you'd think we were in Alaska instead of Texas. I walked in wearing my grease-stained boots, wife by my side, my daughter clutching her sketchbook against her chest. The room was filled with newcomers, folks sipping sparkling water out of tall glasses, nodding like they'd lived here forever. A few old-timers sat in the back, arms crossed, saying nothing. Aaron stood at the front with a microphone, pearls glowing under the lights. She clicked a remote, and a slideshow appeared on a giant screen behind her, photos of my dad's garage, taken from every bad angle possible. Crooked shots, peeling paint close-ups, weeds along the edge of the driveway. She'd even snap pictures of my daughter's bike leaning on the wall, as if that were a crime. Ladies and gentlemen, she purred. We must address the visual and safety hazard located on Parcel 12, the so-called brick garage. Its presence lowers the property value of every home in this community. She flipped to the next slide, words stamped in bold red letters, demolition required. I stood, holding my voice steady. That garage was built by my father in 1960. It stood through hurricane, floods, and more summers than you've lived in this town. If it were dangerous, it wouldn't still be standing. Karen tilted her head, lips curving into that cold smile. Mr. Carter, emotional arguments don't override community standards. All in favor of demolition. Hands shot up across the room, polished nails. Rings glinting under the lights. I counted 9 raised high. Against only 2, Karen tapped her pearl necklace like it was a gavel. Motion carried. The structure must be removed within 30 days. Non-compliance will result in fines of $1,000 per day. My daughter whispered, as her voice tight. Dad, they can't do this. Right. I put my arm around her. They can try. As we walked out, old Mr. Alvarez, who'd run cattle here since the 1970s, leaned close and muttered, "Don't let her win, Mike. That garage belongs to Cedar Ridge more than her glass castle ever will." That night, I sat in the garage, lantern light dancing on the brick walls, tools hanging where my dad had left them. I could almost hear his voice. "Don't quit, son. Stand your ground." The next morning, I drove into town and headed straight for the courthouse, a squat building with faded paint and the smell of old paper. I asked the clerk for property and dam record. He waved me down a dusty hallway to a storage room where steel cabinets lined the wall. For hours I flipped through deeds, survey maps, and tax receipts. My fingers blackened with dust. I was about ready to quit when I opened a drawer labeled Cedar Ridge Dam, 1940 to 1960. Inside was a bundle tied with string. At the top was a name I knew by heart, Carter. I untied it and read, my grandfather, a man I'd never met but always heard stories about, had contributed funds and labor to build the Cedar Ridge Dam. And in return, the Carter family was granted partial control and maintenance rights in perpetuity. I sank into a chair, heart pounding. That garage wasn't just history. My family had a legal hand in the very dam that created this lake. I folded the papers carefully and slipped them into my jacket. Karen thought she held all the power, but Cedar Ridge had secrets she didn't know about. Karen must have sensed she hadn't broken me, because the pressure doubled overnight. First came a citation about my truck, my old Chevy. The same one I drove back from deployment. Suddenly became abandoned property because it had a dented fender. Fine, $200. Then Rusty, our lab mix, was labeled aggressive for barking at a delivery van. Fine, $100. A week later, a letter arrived saying my wife's flower beds violated uniform landscape guidelines. Fine, $50 a day. By the time July rolled in, Karen's math claimed I owed more than $10,000 in penalties. Her letters stacked high on the kitchen table, each one colder than the last. But fines weren't enough for her. I started noticing a black SUV parked by the lake at odd hours. Someone inside snapping pictures with a long lens, always aiming at the garage. Neighbors told me Karen had been hinting that Mike Carter is unstable, maybe dangerous. It was the same playbook she used on others isolated. Smear, squeeze until they fold. My daughter slammed her sketchbook shut one evening, eyes burning. Dad, she's trying to crush us. Don't let her. I looked at her, then at the old garage walls my father's hands had built. We're Carters. I said, we don't back down. And the more I dug through those courthouse files, the more I realized my grandfather hadn't just signed some agreement. He'd been part of the original crew that laid concrete for the Cedar Ridge Dam. The rights he secured weren't symbolic, they were binding. One sweltering afternoon in August, While searching through an old metal box of dam maintenance logs, I found something that made my breath catch. Beneath stained papers lay a heavy iron key, dark with rust. Attached to it by a brass tag was a single word, Carter. I held it in my palm, sweat dripping from my brow. It wasn't decorative, I remembered as a boy, walking with my dad near the dam. Seeing a lock plate on the spillway mechanism that looked exactly like this, that night I sat inside the garage, lantern flickering on oil-stained tools, the key cool in my fist. My wife sat beside me, quiet but steady. Your daddy would be proud. Mike, she said softly, he always told you, never let anyone take what's yours. I nodded, staring out at the lake shimmering under the moon. Karen thought she was tightening her grip, but what she didn't know was that I now held something stronger than her fines or her words, because Karen had already plastered posters all over town about her grand event, the Cedar Ridge Spring Festival. She promised fireworks for investors from Dallas, a stage built over the water, reporters snapping photos of the future of Cedar Ridge. But with this key, I had the means to remind her and everyone else whose roots truly ran deepest in this town. The Cedar Ridge Spring Festival had always been a simple affair when I was a kid. Folks grilled brisket, kids chased each other through the field. The fiddles played late into the night. It was about neighbors, not investors. But under Karen's control, the festival became something else entirely. By April of the year 2021, she had turned it into her personal showcase. White tents lined the lakeshore, strung with twinkle lights. Caterers from Dallas hauled in trays of shrimp and champagne flutes. A glossy stage was built facing Cedar Ridge Lake, complete with banners that read, "Welcome to the future of lakeside living." Karen strutted around in a designer coat despite the Texas heat, barking orders into a walkie-talkie. Pearls glinting in the sun. News crews rolled in. Investors in suits milled about, nodding like they were already counting their profit. Meanwhile, before the crowd gathered, I was standing inside the dam's control shed at sunrise. The old gear smelled of grease and rust, and the heavy iron key weighed like history in my hand. Deputy Ramirez, from the county sheriff's office, stood beside me. He looked over the Carter deed, page by page. Finally, he said, "Mike, this is legit. These rights didn't expire. You're not breaking the law here. You're enforcing it. Just make sure you're ready for the storm that follows." I nodded. My hands gripped the wheel. With a turn of the key, the mechanism groaned a lot. The gates creaked open, and a roar of water surged out into the spillway. The ground trembled under our boots. By mid-morning, while Karen's festival was in full swing, Cedar Ridge Lake had dropped nearly 2 feet. At 10 o'clock sharp, Karen took the stage, microphone in hand. "Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the premier event of Cedar Ridge. Today marks the dawn of a brighter, more refined future for our community." Applause and camera flashes followed her words. But behind her, the lake told another story. The shoreline had sunk, exposing muddy banks. Docks tilted like broken teeth. Boats scraped bottom. Kids pointed. Investors frowned, and whispers cut through the air. Someone shouted, "The lake's dropping." Karen froze, eyes darting to the water. Gasps rippled across the crowd. Fish flopped in the shallows. Cattails stuck out like skeletons. I stepped forward from the crowd. I was walking down the center aisle of folding chairs, the heavy key hanging on a chain around my neck. In my hand were the old deed papers, yellowed but clear. The cameras turned toward me. "This isn't Sabbath," I said, holding the documents high. "This is maintenance authorized by rights given to the Carter family in 1945. And when my grandfather helped build this dam. That garage you're trying to tear down, it belongs here. Same as the lake itself. And this key proves we still hold authority." The crowd murmured, Reporters zoomed in on the documents. Deputy Ramirez stood firm beside me, nodding. Karen stormed off the stage, face red, her pearls bouncing. You can't do this. This is criminal. This is sabotage. Ramirez raised a hand. Ma'am, Mr. Carter is within his rights. If you interfere, you'll be removed. The cameras caught it all, Karen shrieking, pointing, her voice cracking, while I stood calm, the deed and key in plain sight. By noon, the lake had dropped another 2 feet. The lobster went untouched. The jazz band packed up, and the investors muttered as they stomped away. What was supposed to be Karen's coronation turned into her humiliation. That evening, the local news ran the footage on repeat. On one side of the screen, Karen, red-faced, yelling nonsense. On the other, me, steady as stone, holding the Carter deed. By the next morning, folks across Texas knew the story. And just like that, the Queen of Cedar Ridge was toppled in front of her own stage. Weeks after the Spring Festival felt like a storm rolling through and clearing the air. For years, Karen had strutted around Cedar Ridge like a queen. Now, she looked more like a scarecrow left standing in an empty field. Her first move was to sue me. She marched into county court with her Dallas lawyer at her side, claiming I had sabotaged community property and caused irreparable damage to investment. She even tried to say my actions endangered lives. Judge Holloway flipped through the old Carter deed, tapped the pages with his pen, and said, Mr. Carter acted within legal rights established in 1945. Case dismissed. That single ruling broke her image. Investors pulled out almost overnight. Half-finished luxury homes sat quiet on the ridge, lumber stacks turning gray in the Texas sun. The brochures promising exclusive lakeside living ended up rotting in dumpsters behind the clubhouse. Then the state came sniffing. An audit team tore through the Cedar Ridge Lakeside Community Association's books. What they found wasn't pretty misused dues. Fake safety inspections signed by her cousin. Sweetheart contracts with her brother-in-law. Within a month, the HOA board voted her out unanimously. She went from calling the shots to packing boxes into a rented U-Haul. Her pearls traded for dark sunglasses. Rumors spread she headed back to Dallas, tail between her legs. For the rest of us, something better rose out of the ashes. The new HOA board, this time made up of locals, voted to honor the town's heritage instead of erasing it. Their first order of business recognizing the Carter Garage as a protected historic landmark. On a cool May morning, neighbors gathered at the garage. A bronze plaque was bolted onto the brick wall, reading, Carter Garage, built 1960, preserved for the people of Cedar Ridge. Standing there with my wife's hand in mine and my daughter clutching my arm. I felt the weight lift off my chest. My daughter whispered, Dad, Grandpa would be proud. My wife wiped a tear. Whispering, he'd say, you fought the right way. After that, the garage wasn't just mine anymore. Folks began using it for town potlucks, barbecues, even as a meeting spot for high school kids learning car repair. The sound of laughter and music echoed again where silence had once sat heavy. Karen's name became a joke. A warning told over iced tea at the diner. Don't go pulling a Karen. Folks would laugh whenever someone got too bossy. But the garage, red brick shining under the Texas sun, tools hanging like a museum of hard work, stood stronger than ever. And everyone knew it would stand long after Karen's fancy brochures were dust. By the next summer, Cedar Ridge felt like it had taken a deep breath for the first time in years. Without Karen hovering over everyone, the neighborhood softened. The kids zipped around on bikes without fear of violation notices. Families planted gardens again. Clotheslines stretched between mesquite trees. And laughter carried across the lake in the evening. In the Carter Garage, it became more than a landmark. It turned into the heartbeat of the town. On Friday nights, lanterns swung from the rafters, and fiddles played until the stars burned bright above. Old-timers told stories over barbecue. Teenagers learned to change oil and patch tires. And veterans like me found peace leaning against the workbench. Coffee mugs in hand, my daughter started bringing her friends, sketching the garage walls and painting murals in the back lot. She said it was like drawing roots into the ground. Hearing that, I felt something loosen in my chest. Maybe this fight wasn't just about keeping bricks standing. Maybe it was about teaching her and everyone that some things are worth protecting. Even Mom, frail but stubborn, made the trip one evening. She sat in a lawn chair, Rusty curled at her feet, watching kids chase fireflies. Your daddy would be proud. Mike, she whispered, voice soft but steady. He always said a man's duty is to guard what was handed to it. As for Karen, she was little more than a ghost story by then. Outsiders would ask, whatever happened to that HOA lady? Locals would smirk and shake their heads. She forgot you can't buy roots, and she sure learned you can't bulldoze them either. I'll tell you this much, every one of us has a garage in our lives. Maybe it's a barn, a cabin, a garden planted by your grandmother. Maybe it's just a tree your kids grew up climbing. And one day, somebody might try to take it away with paperwork, rules, or fines. The question is, will you let them, or will you stand your ground? Like my father taught me, like I showed my daughter. So I'm asking you, folks, if someone like Karen tried to tear down your family's legacy, what would you do? Would you give in? Or would you fight with everything you've got? Tell me in the comments. I'll be reading every single one. Because stories like mine ain't just about Texas. They're about all of us.